Hello, thank you everyone for joining us for this Lawyers for Learners webinar, a trauma-informed approach to addressing legal needs. We are honored to have two presenters from Legal Action of Wisconsin today. Megan Sprecher is a supervising attorney with the Legal Action of Wisconsin office in Madison, where she focuses on barriers to employment. And she is co-presenting with Vincent Niemann, an MATC student intern who works with Legal Action, assisting with the Student Legal Aid Project. Thank you both for being here with us today and sharing your expertise. With that, I will turn it over to Megan and Vincent.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And Katie, thanks so much for the introduction and for having us on this important topic. Like Katie said, I'm Megan Sprecher. I'm an attorney with Legal Action of Wisconsin. We cover roughly the lower half of the state, and we have 6 offices, and we're a nonprofit provider of civil legal services. We are one of the partners under the Lawyers for Learners umbrella, and we get people where they need to go in terms of referrals to other partner organizations for our service area. And then at Legal Action, we focus on, like Katie said, barriers to employment work. So pardons and conviction corrections and expungements and things like that. And then I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter, Vincent, so he can introduce himself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vincent Niemann. I'm a student at Milwaukee Area Technical College. For about the last year, I've been a student intern with Legal Action of Wisconsin, specifically with the Student Legal Aid Project, where we try to help those that might have legal needs that can impede their future success.
So we're going to talk to you about a couple different things. So we're going to talk about trauma and what we call adverse childhood experiences. Vincent will talk about how Tech College faculty and staff can be a trusted referral source, how the referral mechanism works, what happens when a student first reaches out. I'll talk a little bit about trauma-informed services that we as the legal services providers can provide, and we will have time for questions at the end. So next slide, please. So first we'll talk about what trauma is. So I think it's a term that we certainly have all heard, we've probably all used in our day-to-day conversations. But just so that we're all on the same page, trauma is a pervasive problem. It results from exposure to an incident or series of incidents or events that are emotionally disturbing or life-threatening. They have lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and their mental, physical, social, emotional, and or spiritual well-being. And this is a topic that's really certainly near and dear to my heart. Before I came to Legal Action, I spent about 15 years working with domestic abuse and sexual assault survivors, specifically on immigration cases. So certainly there's a lot of trauma wrapped up in those types of cases. But one thing that I hope that you'll take away from this presentation is that, it's something that is shockingly common. So, Vincent will talk about the statistics of just trauma experienced by the general population, but there could be people that you're interacting with at tech colleges who have experienced or are experiencing trauma, and you might not even know that or be able to notice that. Next slide. So what can the effects be of experiencing trauma? So, first I want to explain that each person experiences it differently. So you could have 2 people experience, pretty much exactly the same traumatic situation, and it could impact them in very different ways. It could manifest in very different ways. But what Bessel van der Kolk, who has done a lot of studying on trauma, wrote, he was the author of a really interesting and helpful book called The Body Keeps the Score, which is, what are the results of experiencing trauma. So it can impact your brain. It can impact how your brain works, your trauma responses, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. It can impact your biology. There have been a lot of studies done, for example, on the impacts of on the children of Holocaust survivors, people who were not born during the Holocaust, but whose parents went through, certainly, a horrific traumatic event, and how that passes on through DNA. So how different historical trauma, like, we've heard a lot about the Native American boarding school traumas and abuses that have happened, how genocides and things like that are passed on through our DNA. Behavior, so it can certainly impact how we act, how we respond to things. It can impact your body, your health, your physical well-being. Certainly obvious things like carrying stress, having tight muscles, things like that. But also other poor health outcomes that we'll talk about a little bit more later. Beliefs, so how you're viewing the world, how you're responding to things, how someone who hasn't experienced a particular trauma, might not think twice about an event or an experience. That could be very different for someone who's experienced trauma. Next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about adverse childhood experiences, or what we often refer to as ACEs. So this was a study that was done by Kaiser Permanente in California. I believe it was Orange County. And what they looked at is they wanted to know what of these traumatic experiences, what were the rates of them in their patient population. So this was a patient population that was, relatively well-to-do financially. They were not in any at-risk group. And so the hypothesis was that, it would be pretty low. And what they looked at is these listed traumatic events. So did someone experience one or more of these things before they turned 18? So emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, mother treated violently in the home, substance abuse in the household, mental illness in the household, parental separation or divorce, incarcerated household member, emotional neglect, physical neglect. And what they found, which was very surprising, given that their patient population was relatively financially stable and not, part of a particular at-risk group, was that a lot of people had experienced ACEs. And that was something, that was surprising. It was a surprising outcome. Next slide. So why does this matter? So what they also studied, since Kaiser Permanente is a health system, is they're particularly interested in health. So how did experiencing ACEs, what were the lasting effects? And what they saw is saw a higher incidence of, physical health issues, traumatic brain injuries, fractures, burns, mental health issues, so depression, anxiety, higher rates of suicide, higher rates of post-traumatic stress disorder, higher rates of unintended pregnancy complications, issues with the baby, higher incidence of HIV, sexually transmitted infections, also a higher incidence of things like cancer and diabetes, certainly increased substance use issues, and it also impacted education levels, occupations, income throughout the lifetime. Next slide. So this is a graphic that I also like to include. It's from the CDC. And one thing that's important, I think, to note about the ACEs study is that, it doesn't include things like, a lot of other issues that are impacting people. So things like systemic racism, things like xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, things like that. So what this graphic shows is that, it's all related. So historical trauma, which we talked about how that can impact, DNA, social conditions, local context, what's going on in the world. And that would include like the isms that I talked about. And then we get into adverse childhood experiences, and all of that sort of builds and builds and can impact lifelong outcomes. So I'm going to turn it over to Vincent right now.
So as I mentioned earlier, I've been working on the Student Legal Aid Project, and going through this process, you see how these adverse childhood experiences have affected students. 1 in 3 young adults, 18 to 25, have mental illness. Many of them are traced back to these ACEs. It's the higher among the younger generation, it seems, for various factors. It could be just that it's more acceptable to talk about it now, but also they've had less time to maybe seek help to help deal with these issues. 33% of students in Wisconsin tech colleges have been dealing with food insecurity. That could be, having to skip a meal because they need to, pay for books or something like that. 68% of students are working while they're attending classes, having to juggle these on top of, the various other emotional experiences that they've had in their lives can be very stressful for them. This compounds a lot then into, they might experience homelessness if they come from an abusive family. They don't have a good support network. And all of this then will lead to them not able to continue their education. Only 70% of students go on to their second year of college. And so we've been trying to help these people, give them the tools that they need so that they can help succeed. Next slide, please. So here in Wisconsin, 59% of residents have more than one ACE. And like I mentioned earlier, this seems to be more common among younger people that are college age as well. And if I could get the next slide, please. And then as we see in the prison population, 90%, 97% of the prison population has at least one ACE. So we can really see how the effect of these various adverse childhood experiences impact them later in life if it's anything from, petty crimes, substance abuse, things of that nature. These have real consequences as people grow up.
Thank you, Vincent. So I always like to talk about protective factors or resiliency when I'm talking about ACEs and trauma, because, the message that, we don't want to send is that, oh, someone's experienced one or more ACEs, game over. So what some of the protective factors or resiliency factors are that can be really important for people that have experienced ACEs, which, as Vincent said, most of us in Wisconsin, over half of us have experienced at least one ACE. So it is really common. So some of the protective factors that can help us be successful in life and be healthy and be able to engage in the educational and career goals that we have are supportive relationships. So that can certainly be at home with a caregiver. Hopefully that is the case, but that can also be like a trusted teacher or staff member at a school, which can be really important for someone. Healthy coping strategies. So, is the person self-medicating, or are they learning and going through different things like exercise or therapy, if that's something that they need, appropriate healthcare, things like that. A sense of purpose, which I think, if you're part of a community, that can be really helpful. For some people that might be a faith community, for other people that might be, a tech college community or a specific student group within a tech college, that can provide someone with a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. Positive parenting by caring adults, so by a parent, by a guardian, by a grandparent, by an aunt or uncle, someone like that. Emotional self-awareness, so understanding what they're feeling, why they might be feeling that way, why it's any response to trauma is normal, because there is no normal response. It's just each person experiences it themselves, how they're going to experience it. Socioeconomic stability. So that's something, certainly when we're doing our pardons and expungements and those types of cases, and then when we're referring for like immigration referrals, all of that is financially stabilizing for people. So that can also be a protective factor. Willingness to seek help. So if they're willing to reach out for counseling or, financial assistance or legal services, things like that can be really positive for the person. And then problem solving skills. So just remember, even if someone has experienced something traumatic, like it's not the end. There are a lot of factors that are within their control, or you can help provide people in your role at the tech college. Next slide. So how does this impact people? So what are some ways that somebody might exhibit trauma? So like I said, it could be any number of different ways. Someone could experience, a similar or exactly the same trauma and respond totally differently because of their life experiences, because of their personality, etc. But some of the things to look out for are disengagement. So just not being engaged in things that they, especially if they used to be, disempowerment. So feeling like they're not able to do anything for themselves. Linear memory. So, having trouble remembering, the order of when things happened. Scattered memories. So, remembering one thing that's happened 10 years ago and then one thing that happened 10 minutes ago, and not really being able to, explain the story in a way that makes sense. Self-medicating. So we see this a lot with people who have experienced trauma, particularly if they're not able to access, our health system. So if somebody has no insurance, or if they're underinsured, or if it's difficult to find counseling services that are culturally or linguistically appropriate for them, that can all make it difficult for the person to get, effective, safe, healthy treatment. Focus on minutia for a sense of control. So I've seen this with clients where, we'll be talking about one thing and they're just obsessed with one specific detail. It could be something that's just not even at all related to what we're talking about. That can be an example. One thing that I've done with that is, let them talk. But if it gets to a point where, we do need to move on and talk about what is actually relevant to their case, we'll talk about how it's important for me to get all the information, and maybe even say, like, let's talk about this for 10 more minutes. And then I do want to make sure that I get this important information that's really relevant to your case. Short-term memory issues. So, having trouble remembering things that happened recently, maybe being able to remember things really well from childhood or from a long time ago, but not being able to remember things that just happened. This can also be, an indication of traumatic brain injury, depending on the type of trauma. So when I was working with domestic abuse survivors, there is a really high incidence of traumatic brain injury just based on the abuse. So that could also be related to traumatic brain injury. Ability to focus can be an issue. And then also we have avoidance. So just not wanting to deal with the issue, not wanting to be re-traumatized. So not, a lot of the legal responses, that are involved with people who have experienced trauma, it's going to bring that back up. So that could be family law, that could be immigration for, someone who's fleeing their home country because of abuse. That could be, for our cases, a lot of people who have been through the criminal legal system have experienced a lot of trauma, before that, and then also as part of that process. So just not wanting to, engage with the legal resolution because it's going to bring that back up. Next slide. So the 4 R's. So what we want to do, as legal service providers, I know that we have some of us on the call, and then also as Tech College faculty and staff and other community groups is we want to realize the prevalence of trauma. So as Vincent said, in Wisconsin, we have nearly 60% of adults in Wisconsin report at least one ACE while growing up. So that's, more than half of us in Wisconsin have experienced at least one ACE. And that's not even, getting into groups that are traditionally marginalized or more at risk of different factors. So we also want to recognize how trauma affects individuals. So it can, overwhelm someone's ability to cope. It can lead to negative consequences, substance use, physical and mental health issues. And then how do we respond? So, there might be some of you on the webinar who are wondering, so what do I do? So put this knowledge into practice. So what we want to do is we want to listen. We want to be respectful of people. We don't want to assume that someone has or has not experienced trauma or a certain type of trauma. And then what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're respectful of their dignity, their voice, their self-empowerment, and just, they're a human being. And first and foremost, we want to be recognizing that. And then trying as hard as we can to resist re-traumatization. So this means trying to minimize situations that could cause them distress or remind them of their traumatic experiences. Sometimes that's unavoidable. So I'll give one example. So when we're asking that an arrest cycle be removed from someone's background check, we are required by the state to get their fingerprints. That's something where it's quite often re-traumatizing for people who have been arrested and incarcerated, because when you're getting fingerprinted, most of the time it's not for a good reason. And so that brings people back to something where maybe they're traumatized by it, maybe they feel shame by it. It's not something that I can change. This is what the state requires at this point. But what I make sure to do is I make sure to explain exactly what is going on, exactly what the form is, that the fingerprints are required. I wish that we didn't have to do this. I know it's not fun, but if you want to proceed with asking that this be removed, this is part of the process. Next slide. And then I just want to reiterate about disclosure. So this is a big topic in the domestic abuse and sexual assault field. So, somebody does not have to disclose a trauma, and they might not. And that's their choice. I think it's a really good goal to try to be a person that people feel comfortable disclosing to. So, I think that's an excellent goal for all of us to have, but also just making resources, for our legal services and other things, just making it generally available so that a student doesn't have to disclose that they've experienced a trauma or that they have a legal issue to be able to reach out for help. So some of these areas are things that people might not want to disclose. Some people will, but others will not want, people at their school to know that they are having a domestic abuse issue, or that they're undocumented, or that they have a criminal history, things like that. So, certainly responding and, being respectful and helpful to people when they are disclosing, but then also making it so that people don't have to if they don't feel comfortable. I'm going to turn it back over to Vincent.
So then for those that want to reach out confidentially, or as a Tech College faculty or staff member, you can fill it out for them if you would like. On the Lawyers for Learners website, there's a easy to fill out form there. Just ask some basic information so that we would be able to have a general idea of what their situation is. If they want to go more in depth, they can on the form there then. And then whatever form of communication they would prefer, they can leave, phone number. If they would prefer to start out by contacting us through email, they can do that. So that way we are able to start the process of assisting them with the various legal problems that they may have. Next slide, please. So then after filling out that form, Legal Action of Wisconsin staff and interns will respond by email, phone, and text. Like I mentioned, we try to allow different forms of communication just with the trauma that they have. They might not want to talk over the phone, and they might like a more impersonal way to get the process started so that they can build up a rapport with us so that we can assist them. And this is especially crucial after COVID, between everyone being locked down and everything like that. They might have more anxiety as things have opened up, and they don't want to, or they're just more nervous or anxious about speaking to someone. We also have staff that speak Spanish, or the use of free translators that are available as well, to assist with those that may have an immigration issue or don't speak that well of English. Um, so then once the staff or the interns speak with these people that reach out, we will try to schedule them a clinic, be it to assist them with their driver's license, expungement, various other issues, could be housing, or if necessary, we will also refer them to one of the partner organizations that are also available in Wisconsin so that we are able to best assist them and get them the legal assistance that they need. So then some of the trauma-informed services, as Megan mentioned earlier, confidentiality is very important. We want to maintain their confidence in us and not give out the information about the student or the legal issue um, unless they give their permission for us to do that. Like if we were to send them to a partner organization, we would want to make sure, is it okay that we give them a basic understanding of your issue? Would you like to? Are we able to send out your information? As mentioned, we communicate by the student's preferred method. It might be difficult for them to show up in person for a meeting, so they would prefer to do it over email or the phone, or even virtually over Zoom or a media like that. And then for the clinics that we offer as well, we do offer in-person options at various locations, and it's also conducted virtually over Zoom. So that way, if they're a student or if they don't have transportation, they are able to still receive legal assistance. And during this process, when we work with them, we have to remember to listen to them. These traumas that they had, especially earlier in life, they can still impact them. And we want to empathize with them while doing that. For example, if a person had just got out of jail and they were looking for legal services or getting expungement, we would want to make sure that they are not, that they're heard, and we don't want them to feel dejected since they might already be struggling with readjusting to society, or they might just be depressed because they felt like they're not where they're supposed to be. So we want to listen and help them to do that. And then when the volunteers and interns that are assisting with this process, there's various training sessions to make sure that they're properly able to accommodate and assist those that are seeking help, and do so in a way that will not re-traumatize them, and that they can empathize with the clients.
So the last thing that we wanted to share before moving on to questions is just a client story. So we had a student client who was pursuing her GED at a tech college and talked to the faculty there about how she wanted to go on to a health-related program after completing her GED, but was really hesitant to commit the time and funds on a health-related program because of a criminal conviction that she had that she thought was really going to impact her ability to get a job, to get licensing, things like that. So something that wasn't initially obvious is that the conviction was very intertwined with the student's history of trauma. So it was not initially evident that she had been a victim of domestic abuse and child abuse, and that this was really connected with the case that she was seeking help for. The faculty member referred the student to Lawyers for Learners and, must have had a really, good rapport with the student because the student felt comfortable, asking about this and how her conviction might impact her. And then we were able to help her get a municipal court ticket dismissed and her one conviction pardoned. So, the tech college faculty and staff really were integral in the process because they referred and encouraged the student and then also provided support letters for the pardon application. So that was the story that we wanted to share with you. And now on the next slide, I think we do have a little bit of time for questions, but you're also welcome to reach out to me outside of the presentation. We want to thank you so much for being here today and for all of the work that you do for our community.